The day my wife told our 8-year-old daughter to stop drawing pictures of me getting better, I knew she had already planned my funeral. 2 weeks later, I heard her laughing in our kitchen and telling another man that my life insurance would change everything. I was 47 years old, 6 weeks into chemotherapy, and standing in the hallway with a hospital bracelet still around my wrist. My wife did not know I was home. She also did not know the latest scans showed the treatment was working. At Thanksgiving, she asked me to sit at the end of my own table, so the family photographs would not look too depressing. Her mother told me a good husband would make the transition easier for everyone. Then my daughter looked up from her mashed potatoes and asked, "Is Mr. Carter still moving into our house when Daddy goes to heaven?" Nobody spoke. I did not shout, expose the affair online, or beg my wife to choose me. I folded my napkin, stood up, and stopped financing the future they had already built around my death. My name is Daniel Harper, and this is the story of how cancer nearly took my life while my own family tried to erase me before I was gone. I lived outside Raleigh, North Carolina, in a cedar-sided house overlooking a small lake. I had purchased the land before I met my wife, Brooke, then spent 3 years turning the old fishing cabin on it into a comfortable family home. I owned a commercial electrical company that maintained backup power systems for grocery stores, medical offices, and apartment buildings across the triangle. It was not glamorous work, but it had given us a good life. A 4-bedroom home, a reliable SUV for Brooke, vacations every summer, private music lessons for our daughter Emma, and the kind of financial security I had never known as a child. Brooke loved that security. For a long time, I mistook her love of the life for love of the man who had built it. We met at a charity auction 12 years earlier. She worked in event planning and moved through crowded rooms with the confidence of someone who always knew where the light was best. She laughed easily, remembered names, and could make every person feel briefly important. I fell hard. Brooke had grown up in a family where appearances were treated like evidence of character. Her mother, Vivian, coordinated church events and neighborhood fundraisers. Her father, Grant, sold luxury boats and spoke about money even when nobody asked. Her younger brother, Mason, moved from one unfinished business idea to another while everyone praised his courage for trying. I became useful to all of them almost immediately. I repaired Vivian's kitchen wiring without charging her. I helped Grant install a generator at his lake property. I loaned Mason money for a mobile detailing company that lasted 4 months. Each favor was called generosity when they received it and forgotten when the next favor was needed. Brooke and I married after 2 years. Emma was born 3 years later, and for a while I believed we were happy. I was the father who left job sites early for preschool concerts, the husband who warmed Brooke's side of the bed when she worked late, and the son-in-law who arrived first whenever Vivian wrote family emergency in the group text. I did not keep score because I thought love became smaller when measured. That belief nearly destroyed me. The first warning that something was wrong came in late August. I had been unusually tired for months, but electrical contractors learned to explain exhaustion as work. Then I found a lump beneath my arm. My doctor ordered tests, then more tests, and finally asked Brooke to join me at the cancer center. She arrived 20 minutes late carrying iced coffee and apologizing about traffic. The oncologist, Dr. Samuel Patel, explained that I had diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. It was aggressive but treatable. He used words like cycles, response rates, monitoring, and remission. I heard only cancer. Brooke gripped my hand and cried. In the parking garage, she pressed her forehead against my chest and said, "We are fighting this together. You will never go through one day of this alone." I believed her because I needed to. That evening, she posted a black and white photograph of our hands intertwined with the caption, "In sickness and in health, we choose hope." Hundreds of people commented. Friends offered meals. Neighbors promised prayers. Vivian called Brooke her brave girl. Nobody asked whether I wanted my diagnosis announced online before I had told my employees. When I mentioned that, Brooke said people needed a way to support us and accused me of being embarrassed by illness. I apologized. That became the rhythm of the next several months. She crossed a boundary, and I apologized for noticing. My first chemotherapy session lasted nearly 7 hours. Brooke sat beside me for the first 2, scrolling on her phone and answering messages about how difficult everything was for her. She took a photograph of the infusion pump without showing my face and posted, "Our hardest chapter begins." Around noon, she said she needed to pick up Emma and left. My sister, Rachel, drove from Durham after work, and found me waiting alone for a rideshare because the medication had made me too dizzy to drive. Rachel was 40, a middle school counselor, divorced, and incapable of pretending something was fine merely because everyone preferred it that way. She looked at the empty chair beside me, then at my face. "Where is Brooke?" she asked. "With Emma." Rachel called Brooke from the hallway. I never heard the entire conversation, only my sister saying, "He cannot take an Uber after chemotherapy," followed by a long silence, and then, "No, being married to him is not the same thing as being medically qualified. It means you arrange for someone to stay." Brooke arrived 45 minutes later, furious with Rachel and embarrassed by what she called an unnecessary scene. On the drive home, she told me my sister had always resented our marriage. I was too sick to argue. 3 weeks after my diagnosis, Brooke suggested Emma stay with Vivian and Grant during treatment. She said our daughter should not watch me lose my hair or see me vomiting. I agreed because the idea of frightening Emma hurt more than the idea of missing her. Brooke packed 2 large suitcases, her school backpack, favorite stuffed rabbit, and enough clothes for a month. Emma held my hand beside Vivian's car and asked if she had done something wrong. I knelt despite the dizziness and told her none of this was her fault. "Daddy's medicine is strong," I said. "You're going to have fun with Grandma while I get better." She looked toward Brooke. "Is Mommy coming too?" Brooke smiled too brightly. "Mommy has to take care of Daddy." That promise lasted less than a week. Emma called me every evening. Brooke sometimes forgot. I would wake from treatment sleep at 8:30 and discover nobody had called our daughter. When I reminded Brooke, she said Emma was safe, and I needed to stop creating more emotional work. One night, Emma asked why Mommy never visited Grandma's house. I covered for Brooke and said she was busy caring for me. The lie tasted worse every time I used it. The second chemotherapy session was the first one Brooke skipped entirely. She texted that a client's engagement party had become a crisis and added, "You're strong, you've got this." Rachel left work early and drove me. She brought crackers, ginger tea, a blanket, and a notebook containing questions for Dr. Patel. When I apologized for needing her, she stared at me as though I had insulted both of us. "You would drive through a hurricane if I called," she said. "Sit down and let someone love you without turning it into debt." I looked away because the sentence reached a place I had been protecting. The chair beside me was no longer empty after that. Rachel attended every session she could. When she could not, my foreman, Luis, came. Sometimes Dr. Patel stopped near my chair and asked about sleep, nutrition, and stress at home. He never criticized Brooke. He did not need to. Doctors who work in oncology learn to read empty chairs. At home, Brooke's behavior changed slowly, then completely. Her phone remained face down. She began taking long showers with music playing and the bathroom door locked. She bought new dresses for client meetings and returned after midnight smelling like a cologne I did not own. When I reached for her in bed, she moved away and said she was afraid of hurting me. The tenderness in her voice made the lie almost convincing. She also began narrating my illness online. Her posts became less about hope and more about sacrifice. Caregiver exhaustion is real. Some seasons ask women to carry everything, learning to imagine a future different from the one I planned. In photographs, she appeared tired, but beautifully composed. She received meal deliveries, gift cards, flowers, and invitations for coffee. I ate canned soup alone because most meals were left at Vivian's house, where Brooke said Emma needed them more. At a neighborhood dinner I was too ill to attend, Brooke told people she was essentially a single mother now. A friend later repeated it to Rachel, believing she was expressing sympathy. Rachel wanted to confront Brooke. I asked her not to. I kept telling myself stress had changed my wife. I told myself a frightened person might behave selfishly without becoming cruel. I told myself our marriage deserved patience. The truth was simpler. Brooke had begun leaving long before the diagnosis. Cancer merely convinced her she would not need to explain the exit. His name was Carter Wells. He owned a boutique fitness studio in Cary and had met Brooke while coordinating a fundraising gala the previous spring. I first noticed his name in the comments beneath her posts. "Strongest woman I know. You deserve light too." Some people are meant to find each other in hard seasons. Brooke liked every comment. When I asked who he was, she said he had donated studio memberships to an auction and accused me of being jealous while she was carrying the family. I apologized again. The moment I learned the truth came after my third treatment. My blood pressure dropped, and the nurses kept me longer than expected. Rachel had to return to school for a parent meeting So the hospital arranged a medical ride. I reached home shortly after 2 in the afternoon. Brooke's SUV was in the driveway. I heard her laughing before I opened the front door. Not the careful laugh she used around me. It was loose, warm, and familiar. The laugh I had loved when we first met. I stood in the hallway with my coat still on and listened. She was speaking on the phone in the kitchen. "I know," she said. "I feel terrible saying it, but I've basically been alone for months." A man's voice came through the speaker, too low to understand. Brooke laughed again. "No, Emma won't be a problem. Mom already has her most of the time." Another pause. "The doctors won't promise anything. Aggressive means aggressive, right?" Then came the sentence that changed me. "If he doesn't make it through Christmas, the insurance and the house change everything. We just have to be patient." I did not enter the kitchen. I went quietly upstairs, closed the bathroom door, and sat on the floor beside the tub. The tiles were cold beneath my legs. My hospital bracelet scratched my wrist. I kept thinking about the word patient. Doctors used it to describe me. Brooke used it to describe waiting for me to die. I wanted to cry, but the medication had dried my body into something beyond tears. I breathed until the room stopped moving. Then I heard her footsteps in the hallway. She opened the bedroom door, called my name once, and came into the bathroom. "You're home," she said. I looked at her. For one terrifying second, I hoped she would confess. She only asked why I had not texted. I said the session ended early. She touched the counter instead of me. "I wish you would communicate. I'm trying to manage everything." I nodded because I did not yet know what else to do. That evening, she left for a vendor dinner. I checked the tablet we shared for household calendars. Her messaging app was still connected. I did not search for months. I did not need to. The newest thread with Carter filled the screen. He called me the situation. Brooke told him she had already begun sorting which furniture she wanted to keep. She wrote that the lake house was technically mine, but assumed marriage would make it hers. She described the life insurance payout as our reset. Carter replied that he did not want to wait forever. Brooke answered, "Trust me, Daniel is getting weaker every week." I photographed the conversation with my phone, then closed the tablet. I felt no triumph, only a silence so complete it seemed to surround the house. The woman sleeping beside me had turned my death into a real estate plan. I called Rachel the next morning. She arrived with groceries and found me sitting at the kitchen table. I handed her the photographs. She read 3 messages, set the phone down, and walked to the sink. For almost a minute, she stared through the window. When she turned, her face had changed. "You need to protect yourself and Emma," she said. "Today." I told her I did not want a war. "Then don't start one," she replied. "But stop standing unarmed inside one." Brooke already started. We made a practical list. I spoke with a financial advisor and changed the life insurance beneficiary so Emma's future would be protected through Rachel as trustee. I separated emergency savings from the account Brooke used for household spending. I updated medical contacts and gave Rachel authority to speak for me if treatment left me unable to decide. I did not empty accounts, hide money, or leave Brooke without necessities. I simply stopped allowing a woman waiting for my death to control what happened after it. The most important change was not financial. I called Vivian and asked to speak to Emma without Brooke arranging it. Emma came to the phone and whispered, "Daddy, are you still coming home?" I asked what she meant. "Mommy said maybe your medicine won't work and we might have a new house later." I closed my eyes. "I am fighting very hard to stay," I said. "None of this is your job to worry about." She began crying and asked whether she could visit. Brooke had told her the hospital did not allow children near cancer patients. I asked Rachel to pick her up that weekend. When Emma walked through my front door, she froze. My hair was thinner, my face had lost weight, and I moved slowly. Then she ran into my arms so hard I nearly fell. We spent Saturday on the couch watching animated movies. She brought a folder of drawings. In each one, I stood beneath a bright yellow sun with hair, even though she knew I had lost most of it. One showed our family together. Another showed only her and me. On the back, in Brooke's handwriting, were the words, "We need to stop drawing Daddy getting better because it may confuse her." I stared at the sentence. Emma thought she had done something wrong by imagining me alive. I told her to draw whatever she wanted. She spent the afternoon making a picture of the two of us in a red boat with Rachel waving from shore. Brooke returned Sunday evening and accused me of undermining the way she had explained the illness. "Hope has to be realistic," she said. "She is 8. Exactly. She needs stability, not fantasy. I am not a fantasy. Brooke looked at me, and for 1 second I saw annoyance rather than concern. Daniel, I cannot make every decision around the version of you we all want back. I replied. Then stop making decisions around the version of me you expect to bury. She went completely still. I had revealed enough to frighten her, but not enough to show what I knew. What is that supposed to mean? She asked. It means I am paying attention. Thanksgiving arrived between my fourth and fifth treatments. Dr. Patel wanted me to avoid large gatherings, but Emma begged to spend the day at home, and I wanted one holiday with her. Brooke insisted on hosting her parents, Mason, his girlfriend, and several neighbors because canceling would make the illness feel bigger. Rachel offered to cook at her house, but Brooke said family tradition mattered. The contradiction would have been funny if it did not hurt. She decorated the lake house as though preparing it for a magazine shoot. White pumpkins lined the mantel. Matching napkins sat beside handwritten place cards. She ordered a new dining table with the joint household card, though our old table was perfectly fine. When I questioned the expense, she said we needed something large enough for the future. I wondered which future she meant. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke nauseated and weak. Rachel arrived at 8 with soup, medication, and a small turkey she had cooked separately in case I could not tolerate the rich food. Brooke frowned when she saw her. I thought this was my family's dinner. Rachel removed her coat. Daniel is my family. Brooke's smile tightened, but she allowed her to stay because guests had begun arriving. Vivian hugged me carefully without touching her face to mine. Grant shook my hand and asked whether the treatment was buying time. Mason complained that the situation had ruined everyone's holiday mood. I watched my in-laws move through the home I had built, admiring renovations, opening wine, and discussing a ski trip they assumed Brooke would join in January. Nobody asked whether I had plans for January. Carter arrived at 4 carrying flowers and 2 bottles of wine. Brooke introduced him as a friend from the charity committee, whose family was out of town. Rachel looked at me. I gave the smallest shake of my head. I did not want Emma's Thanksgiving to become a screaming match. Carter shook my hand and said he had heard I was hanging in there. He sat beside Brooke during appetizers and knew where we kept the bottle opener. That small familiarity hurt more than I expected. He had been in my kitchen enough to know the drawers. When Brooke arranged everyone for photographs, she asked me to sit in the chair nearest the hallway. The light is softer there, she said. In reality, the position placed me at the edge, where she could crop me out, Rachel noticed. She took Emma's hand and stood beside me. Brooke lowered the camera. Can we not turn every picture into a statement? Rachel replied. A family picture that removes the sick person is already a statement. Vivian intervened, saying Brooke deserved one peaceful holiday without conflict. I almost laughed. My cancer had become something happening to Brooke. At dinner, my place card sat at the far end beside the kitchen entrance. Carter sat near Brooke and her parents. Rachel switched our cards before anyone sat down, placing me beside Emma. Brooke whispered that she was tired of my sister controlling the day. I said nothing. The meal began with Grant offering a prayer for acceptance, strength, and whatever future God has chosen for this family. Carter bowed his head. Emma squeezed my hand beneath the table. Halfway through dinner, Vivian began discussing practical matters. She said Brooke had been carrying an impossible burden and would need support no matter what happened. Mason said the lake house was too large for one woman to maintain. Carter offered the name of a contractor who specialized in fresh starts. They were planning the rearrangement of my home while I ate mashed potatoes 10 feet away. Rachel set down her fork. Daniel is responding to treatment, she said. The table became quiet. Brooke looked irritated. We don't know enough yet. Dr. Patel said the early indicators are encouraging. Daniel told you that? I was there. Carter stared at his plate. Vivian said hope was wonderful, but the family needed to be realistic. Then she turned to me. A loving husband prepares people for every outcome. Brooke should not be punished for trying to survive emotionally. I asked what preparation she believed I owed them. Vivian glanced at Brooke. Clarity, reassurance, the knowledge that she and Emma will be secure. Emma will be secure, Brooke's head lifted. She heard the distinction immediately. What does that mean? She asked. I took a sip of water. It means my daughter is protected. Before she could respond, Emma looked across the table at Carter. Mr. Carter, are you still moving into our house when Daddy goes to heaven? The room stopped. Even the silverware seemed to go quiet. Brooke's face lost all color. Carter looked toward the doorway, as though calculating how quickly he could reach it. Vivian said, "Emma, where did you hear something like that?" Emma shrank beside me. "Mommy said maybe Mr. Carter would help us after Daddy is gone. She told Grandma the blue bedroom could be his office." Brooke stood so fast, her chair struck the wall. She misunderstood an adult conversation. Rachel's voice became ice. "An adult conversation about moving your boyfriend into Daniel's home after his death?" Carter pushed his chair back. Brooke snapped that nobody had called him her boyfriend. Emma began crying. I lifted her onto my lap despite the pain in my joints. She buried her face against my chest. I looked around the table at Brooke, her parents, her brother, and the man who had been waiting for my life to end. The strangest thing was how calm I felt. The truth had finally become too large for anyone to arrange. I placed my napkin beside the plate. "Thank you, Emma," I said. "You did nothing wrong." Then I looked at Brooke. "This dinner is over." She laughed nervously. "Daniel, you're emotional and exhausted. Let Rachel take you upstairs." "No." "Carter leaves. Your family leaves. You and I will speak tomorrow when Emma is not here." Grant stood and accused me of humiliating his daughter in her own home. "This was my home before I met her," I said. It was the only property detail I allowed into the conversation. "And humiliation is not what happens when your choices become visible." Vivian called me vindictive. Mason said sick people sometimes became paranoid. Rachel opened the front door and began handing people their coats. Carter left first without looking at Brooke. Grant followed while warning me not to make decisions I would regret. Vivian hugged Brooke and whispered loudly that she did not deserve this. Nobody hugged Emma. After the door closed, Brooke turned on me. "You planned that." "I did not tell our daughter about your plans." She heard a private conversation and twisted it. "She is 8. She repeated what frightened her. Brooke paced the living room, crying and furious. She said Carter was only emotional support. She said I had become distant. She said cancer had transformed our marriage into a hospital room, and she needed someone who made her feel alive. I listened until she said, "You have no idea what it is like waiting to see whether your husband dies." I answered, "You were not waiting to see. You were waiting for it to happen." Her face changed. I took out my phone and placed photographs of the messages on the table. Brooke read the first one and sat down. For several seconds, the performance disappeared. Then she asked whether I had invaded her privacy. Not whether I was hurt, not whether the messages were unforgivable. She asked how I had found them. "The tablet was connected," I said. "You discussed my death on a device I bought for our family." She accused me of setting a trap. I almost admired the instinct. Even caught planning a life around my death, she believed discovery was the greater betrayal. I told her Rachel would take Emma overnight and that Brooke should stay with Vivian. "You cannot throw me out because you are angry," she said. "I am not angry enough to throw anything. I am finished enough to set a boundary." She stared at me. "What boundary?" "You do not get to sleep beside the man whose death you priced." Brooke left after midnight with 2 suitcases. Before going, she paused beside the front door and said, "You are going to regret making me the villain when you realize how much help you need." I looked at Rachel, who was packing Emma's overnight bag, and then back at Brooke. The people helping me are already here. The next morning, my scan results arrived. Rachel drove me to Dr. Patel's office. Brooke had been listed as my primary contact for months, but I changed it before the appointment. Dr. Patel explained that the tumors had responded significantly. 2 had nearly disappeared. He warned that treatment was not finished, and remission could not yet be promised. But the news was better than we had hoped. Rachel covered her mouth and cried. I sat very still. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt grief for the man who had spent weeks believing he might die in a house where his wife was measuring curtains for another future. Dr. Patel asked whether I had support at home. This time, I answered honestly. "Yes," I said, "just not from the person I expected." He nodded as though he understood more than I had said. Separation was not dramatic. I did not turn the messages into public entertainment. I did not contact Brooke's clients or post the Thanksgiving story. I told close friends only what they needed to know. I focused on treatment, Emma, and creating a stable home. Brooke stayed with her parents and told people my illness had made me controlling. Several friends believed her at first. Then they noticed she attended holiday parties with Carter while I went to chemotherapy with Rachel. They noticed Brooke's caregiver post stopped the moment she no longer had access to photograph my treatment. Sympathy weakened when the performance lost its stage. Carter remained beside her for approximately 6 weeks. Then he learned the lake house would not become Brooke's. The insurance money would protect Emma, and the company accounts were not a future lifestyle fund. He ended the relationship in a restaurant. I heard about it from a neighbor who expected me to celebrate. I did not. Carter leaving did not restore anything. It merely proved he and Brooke had built their relationship on the same calculation. When the numbers changed, so did he. Brooke called me that night. I answered because Emma was with her. She cried and said she had made mistakes, while terrified. She said Carter had manipulated her during a vulnerable period. I listened, then asked where Emma was. Upstairs, she said. Can we talk about us? There is no us to discuss tonight. Put Emma on the phone. Brooke's voice hardened. You enjoy having power now. No, I enjoy knowing my daughter is safe. Emma came to the phone and told me she had drawn another picture of us in the red boat. I asked her to save it for me. After the call, I blocked Brooke from contacting me except through a parenting application and emergency number. It was not punishment. It was the only way to stop every conversation from becoming a doorway back into manipulation. Treatment continued through winter. Some days I felt almost normal. Other days, walking from the bedroom to the kitchen required planning. Rachel stayed. Luis organized meals through the company. Employees donated vacation days even though I told them not to. Emma returned home permanently and learned that illness could be frightening without being hidden. She helped me choose hats when my hair disappeared. She placed a sticker on each medication box and called herself my assistant. I never asked her to become my caretaker. Her job remained school, friends, cartoons, and leaving socks everywhere. But allowing her to see the truth made her less afraid than Brooke's secrecy ever had. One evening she asked whether Mommy wanted me to die. I told her adults sometimes say terrible things when they are selfish and scared, but none of it was Emma's responsibility. Do you hate her? She asked. No. Why not? Because hate would take energy I need for getting better and loving you. She considered that, then said, I'm still mad. You're allowed. At Christmas, Brooke requested a family photograph for Emma. She wanted us standing together in front of the lake house so relatives would stop asking questions. I declined. She accused me of refusing to co-parent peacefully. I told her peaceful parenting did not require pretending the marriage still existed. Emma spent Christmas morning with me and the afternoon with Brooke. Before leaving, she placed a small, wrapped box beneath my tree. Inside was a drawing of the 3 empty treatment chairs beside mine, each filled with a person, Rachel, Luis, and Emma. At the top she had written, Daddy was never alone. I cried harder than I had during the entire diagnosis. The final chemotherapy session came in February. Nurses rang a brass bell when I finished. Rachel stood beside me, filming badly because her hands shook. Luis brought half the company crew into the lobby wearing matching shirts that said, Keep the lights on, Daniel. Emma held the bell rope with me. Doctor? Patel smiled from the doorway. The chair beside me was surrounded. There was no social media caption polished enough to improve that moment. 3 months later, Dr. Patel said the word remission. Not cured, not guaranteed forever, remission. It was the most beautiful, cautious word I had ever heard. I sat in the parking garage afterward and called Rachel. She screamed so loudly I moved the phone from my ear. Then I called Emma's school and asked whether I could pick her up early. We drove to the lake, bought ice cream, and sat on the dock. I told her the medicine had worked. She asked whether that meant I would never be sick again. I said nobody could promise never. But today we had very good news. She leaned against me and said, I knew my drawings were right. The separation became permanent several months later. The practical arrangements were handled quietly. Emma lived primarily with me because Brooke had already structured her life around occasional weekends and travel. I did not ask anyone to punish her. Her own priorities were clear. Brooke rented a townhouse near Vivian and returned to event planning. Her social circle became smaller after friends compared what she had said publicly with what she had done privately. I never corrected every rumor. A person who constantly defends himself remains trapped inside the other person's story. I built a different one. I reduced my workload, promoted Luis, and began leaving the office before sunset. Emma and I restored an old red canoe together because she insisted every drawing should eventually become real. Rachel came for Sunday dinners. We did not use matching napkins or photograph every meal. Sometimes the chicken burned, sometimes Emma complained about vegetables. The house became less polished and more alive. Almost a year after Thanksgiving, Brooke asked to meet at a coffee shop. She looked older, not physically, but in the way people look when the audience has left. She apologized without mentioning Carter for the first 10 minutes. She said she had loved the security I provided more than she understood the man providing it. She admitted the cancer frightened her, and rather than face fear, she began imagining a future where the frightening part was over. "You became the frightening part," she said. "Not the illness. You." It was not a good apology, but it was honest. I asked why she told Emma to stop drawing me getting better. Brooke stared at her coffee. "Because every picture made me feel guilty for planning the opposite." That answer finally closed something inside me. I did not need more explanation. I told her I hoped she became a better mother and learned to sit beside people during difficult seasons instead of searching for the exit. She asked whether forgiveness might someday bring us back together. "I forgive enough not to carry you every day," I said. "That does not mean I will hand you my life again," she cried. I let her cry without rescuing her from what the tears meant. Boundaries can feel cruel to people who relied on your discomfort to keep access. That does not make the boundary wrong. Brooke and I learned to communicate about Emma with strict limits. Some weeks she respected them. Some weeks she tested them. Each time I ended the conversation rather than arguing. Consistency accomplished what explanation never had. Vivian sent long messages about family unity until I told her that anyone who discussed renovations to my home while I was undergoing treatment had surrendered the right to advise me about loyalty. Grant never apologized. Mason eventually asked whether my company could install backup power at his new restaurant at a family discount. I sent him the standard estimate. He called it cold. I called it business. The day we launched the red canoe, Emma wore a yellow life jacket and carried the old drawing that started everything. Rachel stood on the dock with her phone ready. Emma insisted I sit in the front because the person who survived gets the best view. We paddled badly, turned in circles, and nearly tipped when a fish jumped near the canoe. Emma laughed until she could barely breathe. From the water, I looked back at the cedar house Brooke had once treated as a future inheritance. It no longer felt like evidence of what I had almost lost. It was simply home, the place where my daughter left crayons on the table, my sister stored coffee in the wrong cabinet, and people entered because they loved the living man inside it. Cancer taught me that time is not promised. Brooke taught me something different. Love without self-respect can become permission. I had believed being a devoted husband meant understanding every absence, absorbing every insult, and waiting patiently for the woman I married to return. But devotion should not require you to cooperate with your own erasure. I did not win because Brooke lost Carter, the house, or the life she imagined. I won because I stopped measuring survival by whether she regretted hurting me. I survived the disease. I survived the marriage. More importantly, I stopped using my remaining life to audition for love from someone who had already assigned value to my death. People sometimes ask what hurt most: the affair, the insurance messages, the empty treatment chair, or hearing Emma repeat plans for my house. The answer is the drawings. My daughter believed hope was disobedience because her mother had already chosen a future without me. That is the part I will never forget. It is also why I do not regret the boundary I drew at Thanksgiving. A child should never be taught to prepare emotionally for a parent's death because another adult finds the imagined future convenient. Today I am 50. My scans remain clear. I do not call myself cured because surviving cancer teaches respect for uncertainty. I call myself present. I attend Emma's school performances, even the painfully long ones. I cook badly, sleep deeply, work less, and answer Rachel's calls before she leaves 5 messages. The empty chair from my first treatments now sits in my home office. The cancer center replaced several chairs and allowed patients to take the old ones for a fundraiser. I bought mine. Emma placed a red cushion on it and taped a note beneath the seat. This chair is for people who stay. Brooke called once on the anniversary of my diagnosis. I watched her name appear and felt no anger, curiosity, or temptation. Emma was outside painting the canoe with a new stripe it did not need. Rachel was arguing with Luis about whether charcoal counted as dinner. My life was noisy, imperfect, and full. I turned the phone face down and went outside. The greatest revenge was not taking anything from Brooke. It was realizing she no longer had anything I needed. So tell me honestly, if your spouse began planning a new life and calculating your death while you were fighting cancer, would you forgive them after recovery for the sake of your child? Or would you close that door permanently and choose the people who stayed beside the empty chair?